My name is Steve Kennedy. For the last 22 years, I've been a debate coach at Munster High School, primarily coaching policy debate. I have with me today two of our Munster policy debaters, Ellie Brennaman and Karina Cresson. We're here to talk to you about policy debate. And our primary goal is to convince you as a coach that you should strongly consider doing policy debate at your school. Now, along the way, we will be mentioning some of the nuts and bolts of policy, but our primary goal is to show you how it is not that hard to get policy going and the benefits that your kids in your program will get by doing it. We especially want to show you that policy debate is not at all difficult for first-year novice debaters to pick up because it is the most logical and practical of all the debate events. Now, to start with just a bit of background in case you know nothing about policy debate. Policy debate is a series of speeches, cross-examinations, and rebuttals for and against a topic or resolution. A round of policy debate lasts a little bit over an hour. In the course of the debate, each debater gives one longer constructive speech of 8 minutes, then is cross-examined for 3 minutes by one of the other team. After that, the other team gives a constructive speech and is cross-examined. After each of the debaters has given a constructive speech and been cross-examined, each debater gives a 5-minute rebuttal speech summing up the arguments of the debate. Now, just as an aside, policy is the original debate event, going back to something like the 1920s. For quite a long time, it was the only debate event. Back in the day, we didn't say we were doing policy debate, we just said we were doing debate, because what we now call policy was all there was. And of course, historically, new debaters did policy starting either as a novice or a junior varsity, and they soon became accustomed to the workings of the event. The speaking format for policy debate has been virtually the same for at least the last 70 years. And the reason for that, I would suggest, is that it works. That over time, it has been apparent that the original format was still the best method for an in-depth analysis and argumentation about a topic. Now, one other aspect of background on policy debate. Policy is and has been for many years a partnered event. You debate as a two-person team, alternating speeches. And frankly, I consider this another reason why kids should be encouraged to do policy, because you learn to work with a partner. Some novices really appreciate this, that they have a partner to lean on for support and assistance. Now, some students do show up for debate and say, I want to do an individual event because I really prefer to work on my own, or I just can't work with someone else. I think that's unfortunate, because learning to work with a partner can be a great benefit for debate, and because sooner or later, practically all these students are going to have to learn to work with someone else, and they might as well learn now. Now, this partnership aspect can have interesting and divergent results. When I first started coaching, I had a team that were boyfriend and girlfriend, and Helen Engstrom, the Hall of Fame head of the program, told me I might want to split them up in case they had a big fight the night before state or district. I didn't do that. And I can report that they've now been married for close to 20 years and have 5 children. And as a team, they were runners-up at the state championship that year. Now, on the other hand, I later had a team that was pretty successful, did well in many tournaments, went to nationals, but did not get along at all outside of debate. This was because one partner was, as we would say, anal retentive, and the other was what you would call a free spirit. Now, I asked the free spirit one time what his partner was doing that week, and he said, ours is a purely professional relationship. Now, the thing to remember from this is that despite their personality clash, these two learned how to work together as a team to achieve success. And so partnerships can have all kinds of different aspects, but they are definitely a valuable part of the debate learning experience and one of the advantages, I think, of policy debate. One of the other principal aspects of policy debate is that we debate the same topic all year. At first reaction, that may sound boring, but the topic is always so broad that within the topic there are many different areas for discussion. Our topic this year is police reform, and our resolution is resolved, the United States federal government should enact substantial police reform in one or more of the following areas: forensic evidence, policing, sentencing. Now that is a topic ripped from the headlines, if ever there was one. This year's policy debaters will argue issues as varied as whether facial recognition evidence should be admissible in court, whether sentencing for drug crimes should be drastically reduced, whether police departments should be limited or restrained somehow or demilitarized, or if certain controversial procedures like no-knock warrants should be banned. This year's policy debaters will become experts on the issue of police reform. The fact that we concentrate on one topic for the year gives us an advantage in that regard over the other debate events where the topic changes several times throughout the year. And it has been my experience that high school students find that it is fun to realize that they have become an expert on an issue and probably know more about it than adults they speak to do. I remember when the Indonesian airliner disappeared somewhere, most likely over the Indian Ocean, and it was never located. One of my debaters, who had spent a year previously debating about transportation infrastructure, said, well, if they had only adopted the next-gen navigation system, we would know where that airliner was. I also remember being at Nationals one year when the topic was weapons of mass destruction, and Ted Turner showed up and spoke to the students and gave a somewhat rambling talk about the need to curb nuclear weapons. And I was thinking, you know, there are about 400 kids out in this audience who just know that they could have made a better speech. Now for novices especially, this year's topic should be an attention grabber. If they follow the news, it's all over the place. Police action and police reform and discussions about what should be done with police. If they don't follow the news, they should follow the news, and maybe this will motivate them in that direction. Okay, so that is a little background of what policy is like. In a moment, we will move to some specific reasons why your school should do policy and will benefit from it. But first, we're not naive, and we know policy debate has something of an image problem. It's too complex. It's too hard. It's too hard to explain to anyone. None of these commonly held beliefs is true. With Karina and Ellie's help, we want to deal with some of the negative myths that are normally associated with policy debate. Now first, we'll hear from Karina Kersan to address one of the prevalent negative policy myths. Karina is a senior varsity debater. As a novice, she actually did public forum debate. Her sophomore year, she came over to policy, and as a policy debater, she has won the Chesterton debate meet twice and been a semifinalist at state the last 2 years. Karina?
So, as Mr. Kennedy said, a large myth in policy debate is that it is too complex. And that is simply not true. Policy debate is based on a simple concept. There is a current serious problem, and here is the solution. It's in the name, policy debate. The affirmative team comes up with an idea, a plan, a policy that should be enacted because of a situation in the US. Right now, as Mr. Kennedy was saying, we are dealing with the issue ripped from the headlines of criminal justice reform. This past summer, there have been protests about police reform. There have been protests about legalization of drugs. And so that is a situation that students will be debating about this year. Now, policy debate debates one topic the entire year. As stated, it is criminal justice this year. For example, one affirmative that might be argued is the no-knock arrest warrant. So a student might say that the no-knock arrest warrant has led to a substantial abuse by police officers. And how do we solve that? Well, the AF might propose passing a federal law prohibiting the use of no-knock warrants. Simple, logical, the problem is identified, and a solution is offered. But then the negative team may argue, well, the AF is wrong. The problem with no-knock warrants are exaggerated. The AF plan won't solve for abuse problem and will actually cause more problems of crime and the dangers for officers. Another example might be, an affirmative that might be argued this year is the legalization of marijuana. The affirmative might say, oh, well, marijuana actually does not have a negative impact on people, and it should be legalized because too many people are incarcerated for smoking marijuana or selling marijuana. But then the negative might say, well, if you smoke marijuana and then get in a car and drive, you can cause an accident. There are various reasons that marijuana should not be legalized, and it could actually cause more harm in the United States and to people. They even may propose a counterplan that maybe it should only be legalized in specific areas of use. And that's what's so beautiful about policy debate. It's the complexity of the arguments that you are able to propose. The idea is that it's not just, oh, yes or no, we should do this or we shouldn't do this, but you can also argue different ideas within that spectrum, that discussion. It's beautiful, it allows for a lot of creativity by students, and it really allows them to show the research that they've been doing, that they do for months and months on end under this broad topic. Now, the affirmative and negative both support their arguments with evidence. This is sound bites of information from authoritative sources that they obtain through research. And believe me, there is plenty of evidence out there on the internet. You can get from books, from good authors, good sources that your students are able to use within a policy debate. Now, in a typical debate, you have the judge that sits in front of the two debating teams, and they act as the policymaker. They decide whether a policy should be passed or should not be passed. If the affirmative side presents enough evidence showing that yes, this policy will benefit the people of America, it will only be beneficial, the judge will then vote for that policy. But if the negative shows that only harm may come from this, or more harm rather than good may come from passing this policy, then the judge will vote for the negative team, and that policy will therefore not be passed. And neg wins. Simple, practical, logical. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. All right, we're now going to hear from Ellie Brennaman about another negative myth about policy. Ellie is a junior. She was a novice policy debater her freshman year and had a very successful year, winning several tournaments. Last year she went varsity, partnered with Karina. In addition to winning the Chesterton tournament, they were semifinalists at state. So, Ellie?
So today I'm going to talk about the myth that policy is hard to learn, because actually policy is easy to learn because it is practical and it builds logically. So basically all that policy is looking at problems and evaluating proposed solutions. So for example, in policy we have evolved something called the stock issues as a tool for objectively analyzing a debate and determining who won. So these stock issues are really beneficial to both competitors and to the judges, because for competitors they give them core issues and components of a plan to look at and to construct their arguments around. And for judges, they again give them these core components that they can use to compare the two sides and look at who was more persuasive in explaining the stock issues. So we call them the stock issues because they're present in every debate. So there are 5 stock issues. There are harms, significance, inherency, solvency, and topicality. So harms asks, what is the problem? Significance asks, how bad is the problem? Inherency asks, is the problem inherent in the status quo, or can it be solved without a major change in policy? So basically, why is the plan needed? Solvency asks, will the affirmative plan solve the problem? And topicality asks, is the plan presented by the affirmative within the topic as worded. So the AF uses these stock issues to organize their case, and it's basically an outline of their plan based on the stock issues using evidence to support all of their points. So in policy, we say that the affirmative starts with the burden of proof on each stock issue, and this is simply logical. Because the judge is supposed to be like a policymaker or a legislator who's trying to decide whether or not to adopt the affirmative's proposed plan. And what the judge asks themselves throughout the round, as the affirmative and negative present their points on the plan, they say, if there's no harm, why change the policy? If it's not significant, why change the policy? If the status quo can solve the problem, why change the policy? And if the affirmative plan won't solve the problem, why change the policy? And if the plan isn't within the terms of the topic, voting for it wouldn't affirm the topic. So when we look at all of these questions and considerations of the judge, we see why the stock issues are a good foundation and organization point for policy debate, because they tell us about all the critical parts of an issue and of the plan and determining if it properly solves for the plan. Again, what the harms are that they're solving for, how bad these harms are, why it's needed, and looking at if it actually solves and if it fits under the resolution. So while the affirmative team has the burden of each of the stock issues, in policy debate, the negative only needs to win or persuade the judge on one of the issues to win. So this is a great evening out factor in policy, because before the debate starts, the negative doesn't know what case the affirmative will present. So the fact that the negative may choose to attack only one or two of the stock issues and can win if they do successfully goes a long way in leveling the playing field. So the main advantage you have when you are the affirmative is preparation. And again, the name of the game is preparing, researching, and thinking critically about your case. So the more prepared you are, you really need to familiarize yourself with your evidence, with all of your points, and with your authors, because a lot of debates get down to the credibility of authors, because policy is probably the most evidence-based event. The credibility of what you are saying is really important, and that you know where your sources are is really important. So knowing all of that and using all of your knowledge and your preparation to do a good job in cross-ex, which is also a key part of debate, of showing the judge that you know what you're talking about and that you can think on your feet, is the key advantage of being on the affirmative. And as you debate your affirmative throughout the season, you should become a better affirmative debater with that same case, because you come across different negative teams, and then you can then see what negative arguments point out the biggest weaknesses in your case, and what the strongest negative arguments are, the ones that are most likely to beat your case, which the judges will find the most convincing because they rate on their ballots why they voted for either the affirmative or the negative. And you use all the information you learn about your plan and its strengths and weaknesses throughout the season to become a better affirmative debater and to only create a better plan, because in policy debate, the burden of proof on the affirmative is saying that you have to create a perfect plan for the problem, or else you cannot win the round. And so while that may seem, as a negative debater, like the affirmative has some huge advantage over you because they're all prepared and you don't even know before you go into the round what specifically their case is on, you don't have to do, you don't have to prove as much in the round as the affirmative does. So because the affirmative has all this time to prepare and should be creating a perfect case, they have to win every stock issue in the round, whereas the negative only has to win one stock issue. The negative can try to win every stock issue, but they don't have to. All the negative has to do is evaluate the affirmative's case and say, what are the biggest weaknesses, and attack those weaknesses. So for example, they can concede to some stock issues in order to win others. So they can say, yeah, sure, there is a harm that the affirmative is trying to solve for, but they don't solve for it, and then explain why they have no solvency. So there are a number of other factors in policy debate that are designed to make it fair and objective for both sides, such as the stock issue's topicality, which limits the affirmative terms to cases genuinely within the topic. So the affirmative will never be the one to bring up topicality, because in presenting their case, they're saying that they think it's topical. Otherwise, that would be going against the rules of policy for them to purposely present an untopical case. The negative is always the one who has to bring up topicality and arguing that the affirmative case is untopical. And the reason they do that is because in policy we already have such broad topics, as Mr. Kennedy and Karina discussed. We have criminal justice reform, and you can do any kind of reform within forensic science, policing, or sentencing. So clearly that's very broad and so many cases can be discussed throughout that. So while that's good because it allows us to thoroughly educate ourselves on the topic of criminal justice reform, which again, ripped from our headlines, is a very prevalent issue in today's world, we can't know everything. So as the negative, you have to hold the affirmative to only presenting cases within the topic of criminal justice reform, because if the affirmative is allowed to just create a case on anything they want that maybe not even related to criminal justice reform at all, then we're not having fair, educated debates because only one side was prepared to debate. And if you can't have a fair, educated debate, you're not getting a value out of this experience, when debate is probably one of the most valuable experiences you can have in high school because of not only the friendships you make and all the information you learn, but of the skills you develop that you can take with you outside of high school. So for the beginning debaters, once they have a grasp of the stock issues and how they work, there's no reason why they should not be ready to debate. So while it may seem overwhelming at first because there is so much evidence in policy, we have these rules of these stock issues, they actually go to help you because all of the evidence allows you to be informed and know what you're talking about and make sure that you're not just making some outlandish claims, that everything you're saying is rooted in fact and evidence. And these stock issues that are crucial to learn provide organization and structure to all of your arguments. So as a novice debater, it is really important to familiarize yourself with the stock issues, and once you learn the structure of debate, as long as you're willing to do the work and do the research and take the time to learn everything that you're talking about, then you should be a successful debater.
Thank you, Ellie. So, policy debate, not that hard to understand. Find a problem, offer a solution. Simple, logical. Policy debate, not that overly complex. Talk about the stock issues. It's not that difficult. Find what is the harm. How is it significant? Is it inherent in the current situation? Can the affirmative team solve it? Is this the topic we came here to discuss? It's not that hard. There's one other myth that I would like to address. If any of you have on some occasion happened upon a debate in some other state where the debaters were talking like auctioneers and frothing at the mouth, please be advised, we do not do that in Indiana. Sure, varsity debaters might talk faster than normal conversation, but what some of the national debate schools call speed and spread is not favored in Indiana. And this is especially true of novice debaters. We primarily want novice debaters to speak clearly and articulately, and we are very much against frothing at the mouth. And we try to make things as easy as possible for novices. For the first half of the year, novices are limited in what affirmative cases they may present. So everyone is pretty prepared and aware for what is going to pop up in the debate. And of course, they're debating against other novices who are initially as scared stiff as they are. And we try to make all judging as positive and supportive as possible for novice debaters. And I can say, in the 22 years that I've been coaching policy, I have never had a novice policy debater run screaming from the room in terror. The most common reaction by a novice policy debater I have seen is that at the end of their first tournament, they beam with pride and elation and say, wow, you were right, I can do this. And I can tell you, for a coach, that is really a great experience. So now I'd like to give you some reasons why your school and your students definitely would benefit from doing policy. And I'm going to start with what I would call the educational or uplifting benefits that they get from doing policy. These are just some of them. But I would say, first, let's talk about research. Policy debaters learn to do effective research. They research the topic thoroughly. As Karina pointed out, the internet is a vast resource of information. Policy debaters learn to comb through it for persuasive information from appropriate sources that support their arguments. They learn to distinguish between reliable and authoritative sources and off-the-wall goofballs. They learn how to evaluate just what a piece of information says and will support, and they learn to analyze their opponent's evidence and to detect where it is weak or contradictory. The research experience policy debaters get is useful expertise in anything that they do outside debate, academically or in later life. And just one other aside tip, you can tell your students at most of their points in high school, students are assigned to write a term paper as an experience, normally in English or composition. And if the teacher will let them pick the subject of their term paper, for many years debaters have known the advantages of simply picking the debate topic as the subject of their term paper because they've already done the research. Now, we did have a teacher here at Munster who was onto that and who forbade her students who were debaters from doing the research paper on the debate topic, but she only did that because at one time she was a debate coach and knew what was going on. I can just tell you that for years, you can tell your students that's been an extra advantage out of doing policy debate. Secondly, analysis is one of the things that you get out of policy debate. Policy debaters learn to analyze, to think critically, and to deconstruct an issue or an argument. They learn through things like the stock issues to determine what is important and what is not in structuring an argument. How does this show a harm in the system? How does this show the significance, or how does this show that the plan that we offer can solve the problem? They learn as how to structure an argument and how to support it with evidence. They learn, as Chief Justice Earl Warren once said about an issue, no matter how thin you slice a pancake, there are always two sides to it. They learn that there's always an answer for every argument, and there's an answer to that answer, if they're able to think about it clearly enough and to prepare. Analysis. Lastly, organization. And with its logic and practicality, policy is definitely the debate event that puts the greatest emphasis on organization. Policy debaters learn early, even as novices, to organize their presentation into contentions or around the stock issues, and to keep track of the arguments that their opponents and they make during the back and forth of the debate through what we call the flow, the notes that they take during the course of the debate. It's not too much to say that policy debaters, by their training, become much more organized people, even if some of them do have a habit of leaving purses, jackets, earbuds, and occasionally pants behind at debate meets. With the emphasis on organization and policy, we have found several times that policy debaters who later move to another event, such as public forum, are actually better debaters in their new event because of their extra training in organization. So, research, ability, analysis, and organization, these are just some of the educational benefits that your students will get from doing policy debate. Now, aside from these uplifting educational benefits, I would like to give you examples of what I would call the down and dirty pragmatic benefits that your students will get from doing policy debate. First, ribbons. Kids like to win ribbons. In the past few years, due to the surge in participation in events like Lincoln Douglas and Public Forum, competition in those events has become particularly fierce, even while it remains somewhat light in policy. We had at Munster an excellent novice Lincoln Douglas debater who went to his first meet. He went 3-1. He couldn't understand why he only got 7th place. And we had to explain to him that was because there were 33 other competitors in Lincoln Douglas at that tournament. This is common. With the current levels of participation in Lincoln Douglas, Public Forum, and a lower rate in policy, kids find it hard to get a ribbon in novice LD or PFD. In novice policy, I can pretty much guarantee you that if your student goes 2-2 at a tournament, he or she will be on the stage for a decent ribbon. If your kids like ribbons, and who doesn't, policy is a promising route. 2, state sweepstakes. The same situation about saturation in Lincoln Douglas and Public Forum applies at the state tournament. Munster last year had a Lincoln Douglas competitor, a state who went 4-2 in the preliminary rounds and did not break to octafinals. I counted 3 teams from other schools in public forum who went 4-2 in the preliminary rounds and did not break to octafinals. Meanwhile, in policy, there was a team from another school who went 3-3 in prelims and broke to quarterfinals. Now that's sweepstakes points we're talking about. If you would like to have your school move up in the state scoring, think about policy to pick up a few sweepstakes points. Now third, nationals. Do you have a student on your team who would like a ticket to nationals? Most of the districts in our state are currently not very competitive in policy. Have you got someone itching to visit Des Moines? Policy is a pretty good option. And remember, if you have a team go to nationals in policy, even if they're going to get clobbered in that, they can still have fun in the supplemental events, and nationals is nationals and always a great experience for the kids. So, ribbons, state sweepstakes, nationals. In addition to the educational value in doing policy debate, there are these somewhat selfish but nevertheless valid reasons why your school should consider having policy debate. Now, at this point, nearing the end of the program, I would like to ask Karina and Ellie to talk a little bit about their experience as policy debaters, and perhaps they will say some things which will help you when you're talking to kids who are potential debaters about what event they should go into. And I'd like to start by asking Karina, in your first debate you did public forum. Your first year in debate you did public forum, so you actually never did novice policy. What attracted you to switch to policy, and how difficult did you find the transition?
I would definitely say there were probably multiple reasons why I decided to join policy, but just to narrow it down to a few. First, I really liked the fact that you had the same topic the entire year, just because it was so broad and it allowed for our creativity when it came to making arguments. It wasn't like in public forum where, you know, one of the topics I had was we should pay NCAA athletes. Well, all we did for that month was argue whether we should or we shouldn't. But with policy debate, last year our topic was very shortly that we should stop arms sales from the United States. And you could argue, well, we should stop arms sales to Taiwan because China will get upset if we continue to sell arms to them. You could say we should stop arms to Saudi Arabia because human genocide in Yemen. There were a lot of topics that you could discuss within that broad resolution, and I really, really liked that part. One fellow debater from another team, I was talking to him about policy debate versus extemp versus public forum, because he's done all three as well. And he told me, and summarized it very well, you know, if someone asked me to talk about one of the topics I debated about in public forum, or a topic that I discussed in extemporaneous speaking, I could talk about that for maybe about like 10 minutes, maybe like 30 minutes max from public forum. But if someone asks me to talk about what I've learned in policy debate, well, I could go on for hours and hours to tell them what I know about that topic, whether it's arms sales or criminal justice reform. And that was a really beautiful thing. I feel that I gained so much from participating in policy debate. I would not have known so much about arms sales last year, or about arms sales last year if it weren't for policy debate, and I feel much more globally aware about what's going on in the world. And another thing that we did discuss throughout this presentation is that policy debate is very straightforward. It's very much, when you look at an affirmative speech, you make your claims and then you present evidence under it. It's very simple to put together. Yes, you need to use your critical thinking and analysis to choose what arguments would be best, but it's basically just that, whereas maybe in LD or in public forum, you're writing a whole speech, like an essay, to present to the judge. It's much more simple this way. And in fact, I think that during today's presentation, we've basically made a policy case. I would say, inherency, schools aren't having policy debate teams. Harms, well, kids are getting educated as well in certain important topics in the United States. They aren't getting trained with as much critical thinking. Let's say plan, you guys should have policy debate teams, and solvency, well, you would have policy debate teams. And advantages are awards. critical thinking skills, students that are much happier because that they feel that they've gained so much more knowledge and are just more prepared for the world. And I guess that would summarize why I joined policy debate and why I'm so happy that I've continued it these past few years.
Thank you. Ellie, now you, on the other hand, did novice policy and had a very successful season as a novice policy debater. Let me ask you, what attracted you to policy debate and how hard was it as a novice?
So I first came to policy debate because I was definitely, when I joined debate, looking to do a partner event, and there are only 2 partner events, and the reason I chose policy over public forum was because of the topic. And my freshman year, the topic was immigration, and then that's something that's been consistent in now my 3rd year of high school, is that I've always really enjoyed and learned a lot from the topics of policy. And like we said, ripped from the headlines earlier, they're always really prevalent topics that anyone should learn about, but I on my own, like as a high school student, I never would have really looked to in depth if I hadn't been in policy and hadn't need to do as much research as I had. So, you know, now I have learned a lot about immigration my freshman year, and like the DREAM Act specifically, because that was my case. Arms sales last year, and now I'm really looking forward this year to learning about criminal justice reform, because it's a really interesting topic, it's a really important topic, and it's honestly something that I haven't looked into on my own, and like I said before, you know, I probably wouldn't have. So I think that is, for me personally, one of the main things I've gained from policy debate is I feel like Karina said, I've learned so much about important issues, and that I never would have sought out on my own or even known how to research on my own, because, you know, we do a lot of in-depth research that you don't necessarily know like where to just go look for, how you can just find with a simple Google search if you're looking at your own.
Thank you.
And then,
oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, you're good. For how hard it was my novice year was definitely the easier of my 2 years in policy. I was super nervous going into my first debate because or the first tournament, I thought I was gonna get destroyed. I just, you know, I was not confident. I was like, everyone's gonna be so good, this is gonna be embarrassing. But then, you know, we went and we did pretty well, and I gained a lot of confidence really quickly, and learning, you know, yeah, I can do this, and it actually gave me more motivation to work harder in the next tournaments, because I really wanted to get first place after coming close to getting it. And so, you know, I gained confidence in myself and my ability to debate well. And I, from then on, really enjoyed my novice year and trying to do my best and trying to get, you know,
Great.
first slot.
Great, thank you. Karina, let me ask you briefly, what would you say to a person who's considering doing debate about picking an event or about specifically picking policy?
You know, I would say, first off, based on my own experience, if you're an incoming novice and you choose one event and you do it the whole year and then decide you want to switch, you can do it. I've done it. It's not something that's too difficult, and a lot of times it is usually the right decision to make. Now, for policy debate specifically, I would definitely highly suggest that a novice debater, if they're considering policy debate, to just join, because again, it's very simple, it's very straightforward to understand. You learn those very important organizational skills that are apparent in every other type of debate. You know, you have to talk about the current situation. You have to say why we need to do a specific act to try to solve something that is apparent in a lot of different debate events. And again, you can work with a partner. For example, I personally had a really great experience my first year of doing debate. I had just switched from, policy debate. I had just switched from public forum, and my partner was really helpful with helping me understand the structure of policy debate, and we worked really well together. And now last year I debated with Ellie, and we had a really good chemistry in balancing each other's strengths, each other's weaknesses, on how we would act during our partnership and how we would act within a debate round. And you really learn those teamwork skills that are really, really important in your future, just as a person in general, in debate and outside of debate. So definitely a policy debate, even if you join and then you decide later on that you'd like to switch to an event, another event, that's fine, because you're gonna have a huge advantage going into that other event because you have gained so much from doing policy debate.
Okay. Ellie, one more question for you. Now, you've been varsity for a year, and in talking to novices when you're a varsity debater, how hard has it been for you to explain debate terminology and debate concepts to them?
I don't think it's really difficult at all, especially because, I knew what it was like to be a novice and at first feeling really overwhelmed and feeling like a little bit out of my league. So you just, kind of like what we've done today, you just have to like sit down with them and say, if you have any questions, you can ask us about it, we're all in this together, because like, debate, even if you like compete individually or just with a partner, it is all about teamwork and about working together as a team to share information and do the best that you can. So you just have to communicate with one another and just break it down for them and say, debate, policy debate is organized, it's based on these issues, and this is how you have to organize your case, this is how you have to organize your arguments, and then just go from there.
Very good. I'd like to thank Karina and Ellie very much, both of them, for helping us with this program. And I would like to thank everyone who took the time to view this presentation. The last thing that I would like to mention is that we have prepared a written introduction to policy debate called Policy in a Nutshell. And it should be available as an attachment that you can download after viewing this presentation. It contains many of the things that we mentioned here, and in 7 pages it pretty much tells you all you need to know to get started in policy. We have used it here at Munster for many years, both to train novices and judges, and we found it to be very helpful. And I would also like to say, even if you have no inclination to ever take up policy, please download Policy in a Nutshell and hang on to it. Because at some point in your career with your team, you're probably going to be at the state or district debate meet, and you're going to have to provide judges, and some of your judges are going to find themselves judging one or more policy rounds. And I can tell you from definite experience that having Policy in a Nutshell available to go over with a judge before they go into that room is very helpful. Even if they only have 15 or 20 minutes to scan it, they will have a much better idea of what's going on in the debate, and it will be a better experience for both them and for the students who they're judging. So if nothing else, I would suggest that you download Policy in a Nutshell and keep it around. So thank you very much. I hope that, as Karina said, I hope we have made a pretty good affirmative case for doing policy debate, and I hope to see it at everybody's school who is watching this presentation. Thank you very much.